on, everybody? Corey here from Gulfstream Lures and Tackle Crafters. We're going to walk through how we rig our planers, the gear you need for planer fishing, some tips, tricks, and techniques, and give you guys a little bit of overview of some of the products that we make for planer fishing, how to use them and incorporate them in your spread. So stay tuned, we're going to jump into it. All right, so in front of me here I have one of my planer setups, and I have two of these on the boat. I've got a number 2 AFCO butt on a Crowder stand-up rod. The model here is the SU5066, and it's rated for 50 to 80 pound line, and it's 6 feet 6 inches long, and it has an AFCO roller guide at the top. I don't know if you can see that roller guide there. Anytime you're reeling down hardware or the big heavy gear, that roller tip is really important. I recommend the Winthrop over the AFCO. Winthrop is a little bit more streamlined, and I definitely recommend that Winthrop if you have an option, if you're getting a rod built. I prefer a straight butt on my planer rods, and the reason I prefer a straight butt on my planer rods is because when we've got 15-degree rod holders, and when you have a bent butt, it's really hard to see that bite. The rod, there's a lot of tension on these rods, and when that rod is bent down in the rod holder, that bite is going to be much more subtle with the bent butt. But when you have a straight butt like this, you can really see when that rod gets pulled over more by the pressure of the planer. And when you get a bite, it's much more obvious because it pops up in a much more dramatic way. So that's why I go with the number 2 AFCO butt, straight butt on this. And as far as the reel is concerned, we have the go-to Tiagra 50 wide. But this is the LRS, it's the extra wide spool, and I have 60-pound braid on here. I would say 60 to 80 is somewhere in the range you want to be as far as how much braid you have, and you want to fill this thing with braid. Don't be afraid to put a lot of braid on there. Go full spool of braid, 600 yards of braid. Don't be skimpy on the braid. The reason being is as few connections as you have on your reel, the better. If you've got 300 yards of braid with several hundred yards of mono backing, that connection, it's a weak point in your line. And when you're fishing for these fish, these big wahoo, they're going to test your tackle, and you want to minimize all the failure points, as few failure points as possible. So as much braid as you can fit on your reel, that's how I go about it, because these fish, a big fish will go on a big run, and they will take off several hundred yards of line in a blink of an eye. So more line the better, fewer connections the better. I get asked all the time if can I use my TLD 20, my TLD 25 and planer fish, and the answer really is no. We're looking at 4, 6, or 8 planer, and the amount of pressure that's on your rod is significant. The amount of pressure that's on your reel is significant. You need a big heavy reel, big heavy rod, something with a lot of drag, and something with a very loud clicker. That's why I really like the Tiagra. It is one of the loudest clickers on the market, and when that goes off, even this is hard to hear, but you do hear it, and it's much louder than a Talica or an International or any of these other reels that are going to get the job done, which you can use. But this is my preferred setup, and I think it's one of the more economical setups out there. You can find these Tiagras used, so I definitely recommend looking at that. The next point I want to talk about in our rigging and in our tackle is I've got a Bimini twist here. The Bimini twist is what you're going to connect to your quick release planer bridle. Now there's a lot of ways to do this, but for the purpose of today's video, we're specifically talking quick release. Either way, I recommend a Bimini twist. That Bimini is going to be extra strength here with your doubled up line at your connection, but it's also going to be some shock absorption, because when that fish hits, again, there's a ton of pressure on this tackle, and you need points in your gear where you have your line, your rigging, your leader absorbing some of that shock and some of that pressure, and the Bimini is the way we do that, okay? At Tackle Crafters, we make this quick release planer bridle. It retails for about $15, and in it is everything you need to set your planer up on your main line, okay? Now when you open this package up here, this is what's going to be in there. It's 300-pound, made in America hollow core to 2 number 10 stainless super swivels. Our super swivels we also sell at tacklecrafters.com. You can find them in your local tackle shop. You can also find these planer bridles in many of your local tackle shops in Southeast Florida. These planer bridles are going to come with your simple hollow core and 2 number 10 swivels. It's also going to come with these 2 double snap swivels in the bag. And what you're going to see is these don't look like your average snap swivel. Each one of these has an end that's made for the planer and an end that you connect to your line, okay? So you see the planer connection has your snap there. The line connection is cut. That's how you remove the planer so you can finish fighting the fish on your reel instead of hand lining your leader in. So what we want to do here is we have a 22-inch bridle, which this is good for 4, 6, and 8 planers. We're just going to tie our double bimini, our main line, to one of our swivels. Now, so once you have the exact center in the loop of your bimini, you're going to put that through either side of the swivel. It really doesn't matter. All I do is I tie a simple uni knot. And because I got my double line here, I'm only going to go 3 wraps, nothing crazy. Just like I would any other uni knot. Cinch it down nice and slow. Bring it to your swivel. This tag end, you can cut that there. And now you have a really nice strong connection to your bridle with that bimini twist, okay? Now, the next part that goes on to the other end is your C-witch and your leader. Tackle crafters and Gulfstream lures, we make these pre-rigged planer yo-yos with the Gulfstream lures zoom witch. We typically use a 1/2 ounce zoom witch in these pre-rigged yo-yos. I got a pink and white here in the bag. These come with 60 feet of 60-pound mono, a 12-0 long shank limerick hook to rig your bonita strip. These pre-rigged planer yo-yos are super easy. You can also buy the witches off GulfstreamLuresUSA.com. We have our zoom witches, our flash witches, which are great for under the squid skirt, which I'll show you here in a second, and build these out yourself, okay? So once you get your planer yo-yo out of the packaging, you got to get down to the tag end. When you come to the end here, you're going to see a snap swivel. You're just going to take that snap swivel, unclip it from the line. We do that so it stays nice in the packaging when we're shipping to stores and things like that. When I'm making these yo-yos for my boats, I always leave that tag end open so I can tie my leader off to the bridle and then remove the yo-yo in the water, actually. It's a really easy way to do it on the boat. But if you're rigging up at home, you're going to see we have this snap swivel here. This snap swivel is meant to be clipped onto your planer when you're not using the quick release bridle. If you are using the quick release bridle, you can go ahead and cut this snap swivel off and tie your leader directly to your planer bridle. So I'm going to do that now. So I cut off my snap swivel and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do a uni knot directly to my planer bridle. This is, again, 60 feet of 60-pound on our leader. And I'm going to do simple uni knot, 4 or 5 wraps. You can use another knot, you can use a clinch knot, you can use an improved clinch knot, you can use whatever knot you feel comfortable with. Confidence is key when you're out in the water, especially targeting these big fish. You know, it's one thing to hook up to a 20-pound Wahoo, it's another thing entirely to hook up to a 60, 70, 80-pound Wahoo. It's almost a different animal. And those bigger fish, absolutely test your tackle. You can get away with little mistakes on some of the smaller fish, but once you start getting into the bigger fish, and after you lose a couple of those, like I have over the years, it forces you to really dial in every connection point and every point of your tackle. So, you know, after years of figuring stuff out, this is what we have found that works for us, okay? So now I have my bimini twist, double uni to my swivel, to my planer bridle, connected to my leader, okay? Now typically if I'm rigging this at home, I'll go ahead and wind this all the way down onto the reel. I'll place my hook in the back of the reel and put them on the boat and go out in the water already rigged. I'll just rig the strips on the hook when I get out there. But for what we're doing today, I want to show you guys exactly how we rig up these planers. So here I've got my planer bridle. 22 inches is the perfect length that covers 4, 6, and 8 planers, so that's why we do this. On the smaller planers like I have here, this is a number 4. This is longer than what you need, but this is perfect for the number 8. So go ahead and grab. Now when you're on the water and you're putting out your planers, you're gonna go ahead and let your leader out. You have your rod in the rod holder, And when the bridle comes out of the rod tip, you're going to stop. And you're going to grab your bridle and you're going to connect your planer. And the first thing that you're going to do is you want to connect these snap swivels to your planer. That's the first thing. And you can have these ready on the boat. You have your planers with your quick release snaps on there. And remember, we're putting the side with the locking clip on our planer. The side with the cut clip is going on the bridle. Again, the locking side is going on the planer. The cut side is going on the bridle. Don't mess it up because your planer will come off. And even like this, you can lose a planer or two. And I'm going to give you a couple little tips on how to avoid that. So you're on your boat, you've got your winch out the back with your strip on it, you got your planer bridle in your hand, you're putting your planer on now. Number one most important thing is this quick release snap, you want to put through the bridle side, the side with the 300-pound hollow core, not your mainline side, not your leader side. That hollow core is much thicker, it's much stronger. That's where we're putting our snap through, because after time of putting your snap in and taking it out, it wears that line a little bit, which is why I don't use these bridles more than a handful of trips, 2 or 3 typically. If we're going out and we're catching fish, I'll change it after every trip. Really look at the wear on your bridle and make a decision that's best for you. We're going to put our planer on. We're always going to go lead forward, because when this gets tripped, it comes down like this and it pulls in the water like this. And then when you got a bite on that leader, it pops it up, all right? So we're going to go lead first. Lead in the front, non-lead side in the back. I'm going through the bridle side of my swivel. Same thing with this other side. I'm going to go through the bridle side of my swivel. One thing you can do to help the planer not slide off, and the way it slides off is this clip snap kind of starts to slide out of the swivel. One way to avoid that and help it stick in there is just to pinch it down a little bit so you have more of a narrow gap. It's not as easy for it to come off, okay? So both sides, before I put them on my swivel, I'm pinching these down just to avoid any slipping. More often than not, if you are having an issue, the planer may not be running right. It could be due to current. Check all your connections in your setup. Check the speed of your boat. Speaking of speed, we want to be between about 7 and 9 miles per hour. Play around with the speed, but typically you want to be at 7 and 9 miles per hour, and don't be afraid to go over 10. If your tackle, your rods, your skill level can handle it, speed things up a little bit. Sometimes it's the difference between getting the bite and not getting the bite. Here I have my planer rigged, and now when you're on the boat, and it'd be much easier if I could show you guys this on the boat, but because of the conditions today, I can't. When you're on the boat, you're just going to drop this back into the water, okay? I've been on boats where, you know, the captain is trying to drop it already set like this, and they play with it over and over and over at the side of the boat. That's a waste of time, whether you're doing the quick release or you're just going on with the snap, okay? The reason it's a waste of time is because it's so easy to set. So I'm going to show you guys how to set it with the tip of the rod here. I'm going to take the planer off really quick. So for teaching purposes, when you have your planer out and you're ready to fish and you're dropping it back, typically we're going to have 2 planer rods out. So we're fishing one port side, one starboard side, and you can play with the size of the planers. A lot of guys like to do a number 4 on one side, a number 8 on the other, a number 4 on one side, a number 6 on the other, 6 and 8 together. I also have buddies that fish 2 6s at the same time. They'll do one short 6, so that short 6 is not diving quite as deep because there's not as much line out. And then the long 6 is diving, you know, much deeper because of all the line that's out. It's really able to dig. Play around with how far back you're going. Don't be afraid to set your planer in the whitewash. A 10, 15 second count when you're dropping back the line on the short can work. Most guys are going to do a 20 to a 30 second count on the short, and then somewhere a 60 second count or more on the long. Make sure you're spacing out your planers in a way where they're not going to get tangled. One way to ensure that is to make sure that you have the same length leader on both rods. So if you have a 60-foot leader on this rod, you want a 60-foot leader on the other rod. That way, your short is not creeping into your long. And that's going to help prevent tangles as well, okay? So once you've dropped this back and you want to set your planer, there's a couple different ways to do it. One common way that people talk about a lot online is you're just going to take your line and you're going to pull out several feet of line and then just let go. And when you let go, that slack in the line will cause the planer to dip, and then when it comes tight, it'll be set. If you're finding that it's not working for you, change the speed of your boat a little bit. You may be going a little too fast or a little too slow. I find that the planer's set best around 4 miles per hour, 4 or 5 miles per hour, 3 to 5 miles per hour, somewhere in that range. But play with it for your conditions in your boat. The other thing you can do is you can pick up the rod out of the rod holder, and you can just lift the tip of that rod. You can just lift the tip of that rod up like this and then drop it back. And it's essentially the same thing as pulling slack out of the reel and dropping that forward. It's gonna cause the planer to pull and then sink down, and once it sinks down, that lead is gonna dip down, it's gonna set. When it comes tight, it's gonna be digging, and you'll be set. When you set your planer, you're gonna know. Like it's fairly obvious the amount of pressure that's on there when you set the planer. I like to set my planers at a slower speed than I'm going to be fishing at. Like I said, somewhere in the 3 to 5 mile per hour range. And then as you speed up, slowly increase your drag until there's no line slipping off the reel. The reason we want to eliminate lines slipping off the reel, which is a common issue when planer fishing, and this is true especially of the short, is we don't want it slipping back into the long. We don't want to create tangles. We also don't want those baits crossing or running too close together. So once you get into a following sea, sometimes it's really hard to avoid line slipping off the reel. As a captain, it's important to play with the throttle a little bit. If you're in a following sea and that sea's pushing you forward and there's lines dumping off the reel, just pull back off that throttle a little bit, let that wave pass under you, and then go right back to the speed you were going. A couple reasons we want to do that. Number one, playing with your speed and adjusting it sometimes entices the bite. If you can pull that throttle back and those baits slow down for a second or even start to sink and then they come forward and rise up again, that kind of action can trigger a bite if you're coming over a wahoo. Remember, these fish are doing the same things dogs do when they chase a ball. They're just seeing and chasing. It's a reaction. There's something there and they've got to eat it, right? They think it's a bait fish, they think it's a bonita, they think it's a goggle eye, whatever they think it is. It's a reaction bite, and it's essentially playing fetch with a fish. I mean, you want to drive over these fish so that your baits go directly over their head. It's the same idea when you throw a ball and there's a dog watching, they can't not chase it. It's instinctual, it's a reaction. But sometimes these fish can be very stubborn. Just like dogs can be stubborn and they don't want to chase the ball. And you have to play with your speed, the way you're maneuvering the boat, how you're turning the boat, the colors of your sea witch, the presentation of your spread to entice them to chase your bait, okay? So those are the two ways we set the planer. We pull the slack and release it. We also pull the tip up and drop it down, okay? Got a nice 3-pack of 9-inch bonita strips from Beast Baits, Paul Patterson, over at Beast Baits down in Pompano, makes some of the nicest bonita strips on the market. Check out their hog strips as well. Both fantastic options for rigging your sea witch over. Here I have our 1/2 ounce pink and blue zoom witch from Gulfstream Lures. We just came out with this product at the end of last year. It's basically an improvement to our tried and true trolling witch that we've been doing for the last 3 decades. The pink and blue is definitely one of my go-to colors. Typically, and this is how our rigged planer yo-yos come, we're gonna have a small squid skirt underneath our witch, and inside of the squid skirt, we're gonna have some mylar flash to add a little bit of extra body and flash to our bait. Now, every single one of our yo-yos comes with a 12-0 Mustad limerick hook that we bend out and add a 1/0 stainless steel swivel to, and a pin over the eye for pinning your bonita strip. I'm going to show you guys now how to rig it, okay? You're rigging your bonita strip, the first thing you want to do is put your pin in. Some people like to actually hook the center first so that they can get all the slack out of the center of the strip Either way, the important thing is to make sure it's sitting properly, okay? So make sure the hair's coming back properly, make sure the C-witch isn't spinning, make sure you have action on your bonita strip. If you have all those three things going for you, then you're gonna have a good presentation when you put your planer back and drop it down.